She had worked for him for years, unseen, scrubbing his floors in silence. Then a blind date handed her a $1 bill as payment for her company, and the diner erupted in laughter. What she didn't know, her employer had been watching from outside, and what the Vampire King does to men who humiliate what belongs to him changes everything. The dollar bill landed on the table with a sound that seemed louder than it should have been. Elisa stared at it, crumpled, stained with what looked like ketchup on one corner. A $1 bill sliding across the sticky surface of the booth table at Jerry's diner, like an insult made physical. "There's your budget for tonight," Damien said, loud enough that the couple 3 booths over turned to look. $1. That's about what this date is worth, don't you think? Her throat closed. Around them, the diner seemed to pause, conversations stuttering, forks stopping midway to mouths. Even the hiss of the grill in the kitchen felt like it was waiting for her response. "I don't understand," she managed, though she understood perfectly. She had understood the moment she'd walked in and seen his expensive leather jacket, his cold assessment of her secondhand coat, the way his eyes had traveled over her like she was something he'd stepped in. "Really?" Damien leaned back, arms spread across the top of the booth. "Let me make it simple. My cousin said you were desperate for a date. Looking at you, I believe it. So here's the deal. You get $1. Buy yourself a coffee, I'll eat, you'll watch, and we'll call this whole sad experiment done in about 30 minutes. Sound good?" Someone laughed, a sharp, cruel bark from the counter where 2 men in construction gear sat. Then a woman, near the window, giggled, badly disguised as a cough. Alara's hands shook in her lap. She had worked 2 shifts today at the estate. 10 hours of scrubbing floors, washing windows, changing bed sheets in rooms so vast she could have fit her entire apartment in one of them. Her back ached, her knees hurt, and she'd come here because her coworkers had pushed and prodded and insisted she needed to put herself out there. "You're a good person, Alara," Maria had said, practically shoving her out the service entrance. "You deserve something nice." This was what she deserved, apparently. Public humiliation in a diner that smelled like old grease and broken dreams. "Why?" The word came out smaller than she intended. "Why would you even agree to meet me if—" "Entertainment value?" Damien shrugged. "My cousin said you were desperate for a date. Looking at you, I believe it. So here's the deal. You get $1, buy yourself a coffee, I'll eat, you'll watch, and we'll call this whole sad experiment done in about 30 minutes. Sound good?" Someone laughed, a sharp, cruel bark from the counter where 2 men in construction gear sat. Then a woman, near the window, giggled, badly disguised as a cough. Alara's hands shook in her lap. She had worked 2 shifts today at the estate. 10 hours of scrubbing floors, washing windows, changing bed sheets in rooms so vast she could have fit her entire apartment in one of them. Her back ached, her knees hurt, and she'd come here because her coworkers had pushed and prodded and insisted she needed to put herself out there. "You're a good person, Alara," Maria had said, practically shoving her out the service entrance. "You deserve something nice." This was what she deserved, apparently. Public humiliation in a diner that smelled like old grease and broken dreams. "Why?" The word came out smaller than she intended. "Why would you even agree to meet me if—" "Entertainment value?" Damien shrugged. "My cousin owes me a favor. I told her to set me up with someone pathetic. You fit the bill perfectly. Maid, right? How much do you even make? Minimum wage?" The construction workers were openly staring now. The couple that had been looking at menus were recording on their phone, barely trying to hide it. The waitress near the register had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide open with secondhand embarrassment. Alara reached for the dollar with trembling fingers, not to take it, but to push it back across the table, to stand up, to leave with whatever scraps of dignity she could gather. But Damien's hand slammed down on top of hers, pinning both her and the dollar to the table. You take that dollar, sweetheart. I want everyone here to see exactly what you're worth." Something cracked inside her chest. Not broke. That would come later when she was alone in her apartment. This was smaller, sharper. The sound of hope realizing it had been stupid to exist in the first place. She pulled her hand away, leaving the dollar behind. Keep it. You obviously need it more than I do. It wasn't a good comeback. It wasn't clever, but it was all she had. She stood, grabbed her coat, and walked toward the door. Behind her, Damien's laughter mixed with the scattered chuckles of strangers who'd witnessed her humiliation and would forget about it before their food arrived. She pushed through the glass door into the cold night air, and only then did she let the tears come. Outside, 20 feet away, in the shadow between two buildings, someone who was very definitely not human watched the entire scene with eyes that had begun to glow red. Lucien had lived for 843 years. He'd seen empires burn. He'd watched plagues sweep across continents. He stood in throne rooms and battlefields, in palaces and dungeons, and witnessed every variation of human cruelty the species could devise. Very little moved him anymore. But this casual, calculated destruction of someone who worked in his home, who hummed while she cleaned, who never asked for anything, this ignited something ancient and cold in his chest. He'd come downtown tonight wearing his human disguise, because even vampire kings sometimes needed to remember what the mortal world looked like without the filter of power. He'd been walking past the diner when he'd glimpsed Alara through the window, sitting across from a man whose body language screamed predator. Curiosity made him stop, concern made him listen, and now rage, quiet and absolute, made him follow. Inside the diner, Damien was ordering the house special, laughing with the waitress about dodging a bullet. His phone was out, probably texting someone about his successful humiliation. The cruelty was too smooth, too practiced. This wasn't a bad date. This was a performance. Lucien's enhanced hearing caught fragments of other conversations. Did you see her face? God, that was brutal. I'm definitely posting that video. Alara made it to the bus stop half a block away. She stood under the flickering streetlight, wiping tears with the sleeve of her coat, shoulders hunched against the cold and the weight of public shame. Lucien could kill Damien right now. Easy. Step into that diner, let the human mask slip, and show everyone what real fear looked like. 30 seconds, and it would be over. But 8 centuries had taught him that the most satisfying vengeance wasn't the quickest. It was the kind that unraveled completely, that revealed every hidden thread, that made people understand exactly what they'd done wrong before the consequences arrived. So instead of killing Damien immediately, Lucien followed him when he left the diner 40 minutes later, followed him to a parking lot by the river where the lights barely worked and the shadows pooled deep, followed him right up until Damien pulled out his phone and made a call that changed everything. Uncle Marcus? Yeah, it's done. The asset took the bait perfectly. Lucien went very, very still and listened and learned that this wasn't just about cruelty at all. It was about war. Damien leaned against his BMW, scrolling through the videos people had already posted online. The Maid's humiliation had gone semi-viral in local groups. 300 shares and counting. Perfect. He hit speed dial. His uncle answered on the first ring. Well, Marcus Kane's voice was gravel and gunpowder. Did she break? Like glass, Damien reported, grinning at his reflection in the car window. Public crying, complete emotional collapse. The whole diner watched. Got it on video from multiple angles. She's vulnerable as hell now. Good, very good, papers rustled in the background. We've been monitoring that estate for 7 months. The owner matches every profile marker for a high-level vampire. Reclusive, wealthy, no documented history before 30 years ago. If he has any attachment to his human staff, he'll react to this. Damien frowned. You really think some maid matters to a vampire king?
They always develop attachments eventually, Marcus said. It's their weakness. They live for centuries, watch everyone die, and sooner or later they start caring about the humans around them. Some twisted form of loneliness. We've documented it in 43 cases. You break what's theirs, they reveal themselves. Genius. Damien checked his watch. So what happens when he surfaces? We have 17 hunters positioned around the city. The moment he makes a move, confronts you, tries to help the girl, anything, we track him. Follow him back to his real location. Then we strike when he thinks he's safe. Damien whistled. This is bigger than I thought. This is the future of hunting, Marcus said, and his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. For 300 years, hunters have fought these creatures directly. We lose every single time. They're stronger, faster, they have magic. But psychology, human vulnerability, that's our weapon. We've already identified 17 targets across the region. Humans connected to suspected supernaturals. We humiliate them, traumatize them, make them need protection. And when their vampire friends come running, we're ready. In the shadows, 30 feet away, Lucien stood absolutely motionless. His enhanced hearing captured every word with perfect clarity, and each syllable carved itself into his mind like a blade. This wasn't personal cruelty. This was systematic warfare. "When's my next assignment?" Damien asked. "Thursday. College student, 22, volunteers at the Supernatural History Museum downtown. We think she's connected to a shapeshifter clan. You'll take her somewhere expensive, let her order, then publicly accuse her of being a charity case. Maximum humiliation. If anyone intervenes protectively, we've got our target." "You want me to do this again?" "You'll do it 17 more times if necessary," Marcus said sharply. "This operation is going to dismantle the supernatural presence in 6 states. Every vampire, werewolf, and shapeshifter that thinks they can hide among humans, we're going to use their own emotions against them." "What about the maid?" "Keep tabs on her. If the vampire doesn't surface in 72 hours, we move to phase 2, direct contact. We'll approach her, claim we're concerned citizens who saw the video, offer friendship, support, get her to talk about your employer. People share things when they feel vulnerable." Damien laughed. "You've thought of everything. I've been hunting these monsters for 30 years. Your father died fighting them directly, charged a vampire nest with holy water and silver bullets. Brave, but stupid. This way is smarter. We make them come to us. We make them emotional, reckless. Then we kill them." "For Dad," Damien said quietly. "For everyone they've killed," Marcus corrected. "These creatures are predators. Every single one we eliminate saves human lives. That maid you humiliated, she's a collaborator whether she knows it or not, working for a vampire, taking his money, helping him maintain his human disguise. She's complicit. So if she gets caught in the crossfire, acceptable losses. This is war, Damien. Start thinking like a soldier." The call ended. Damien pocketed his phone, still grinning. $20,000 when they bagged the vampire. Maybe more if the target was as powerful as Marcus suspected. He could pay off his car, take that trip to Miami. Then the world went dark. Not gradually, instantly, like someone had switched off the sun. Damien spun, reaching for the knife he kept in his jacket, but his hand never made it. Something grabbed him, fast, impossibly strong, and the parking lot dissolved into rushing wind and crushing pressure and the sensation of moving faster than physics should allow. He tried to scream but couldn't draw breath. And then everything stopped. Damien collapsed onto cold stone, gasping, his vision swimming. When his eyes finally focused, he saw vaulted ceilings, iron sconces casting flickering light, and walls that looked older than the country itself. "Where?" he choked out. "My home. The estate your uncle has been monitoring for 7 months." A figure stepped into the light, and Damien's blood turned to ice. It was the man from outside the diner, but different now. No human disguise. Eyes glowing red, skin too pale, moving with a stillness that didn't exist in living things. "You're going to tell me everything," Lucien said softly. "Every hunter, every location, every single human you've targeted." "I'm not telling you shit." Lucien's hand shot out, gripping Damien's throat, not choking, just holding with casual, terrifying strength. "Yes," the Vampire King said, "you will." And then Damien felt something slide into his mind like ice water, and his resistance crumbled like sand. Compulsion felt like drowning in reverse. Water forcing its way out of Damien's lungs instead of in, pulling truth with it whether he wanted to speak or not. "Tell me about the Hunter Network," Lucien commanded, and Damien's mouth opened against every instinct of self-preservation. 73 active hunters across 6 states. My uncle, Marcus Kane, runs the Eastern Division, Philadelphia headquarters with satellite cells in Boston, Baltimore, Richmond. They've been fighting supernaturals for generations, but kept losing. Too many deaths. So they adapted. Adapted how? Psychological warfare. Stop fighting vampires directly. Target the humans around them. Make those humans vulnerable, emotionally broken, physically isolated, desperate for protection, and then wait for the supernatural to reveal itself trying to help. The 17 targets your uncle mentioned? Vulnerable humans connected to suspected supernaturals. Museum volunteer whose colleague disappeared near vampire territory, bartender who serves a suspicious late-night crowd, college student who researches folklore obsessively, librarian in a town with too many missing persons cases, social worker who advocates for homeless youth in werewolf areas. Lucien's jaw tightened. And Alara? Works at an estate we've been monitoring. Reclusive owner with no background before 30 years ago. Massive unexplained wealth. Property older than records show. Classic vampire profile. We put her on the vulnerability list 3 weeks ago. The blind date was operational protocol. Public humiliation to create emotional instability. Makes targets easier to manipulate later. You weren't trying to lure me out. You were preparing to use her. Both. The compulsion dug deeper, pulling out strategy Damien had only half understood himself. If you showed yourself, perfect, we track you. If not, we'd approach her in a week, pretend to be concerned citizens who saw the viral video, offer friendship, support, get her to talk about you, about the estate, about security vulnerabilities. People share everything when they think someone cares. Lucien released Damien's throat and stepped back. The compulsion remained, keeping Damien pinned to the wall by invisible threads of vampire magic. Your uncle called this the future of hunting, Lucien said quietly. He did. He's expanding the operation. Plans to identify 200 human assets within a year, build a comprehensive database of every person connected to supernatural entities, then systematically break them, use them, turn them into intelligence sources, or bait. Damien's own words horrified him, but he couldn't stop. He calls it the Human Leverage Initiative. Every vampire has human staff. Every werewolf pack has human-adjacent families. Every shapeshifter maintains human identities. We catalog those connections and then weaponize them. How many hunters know about this strategy? All of them. It's doctrine now. Marcus presented it to the National Council last year. Unanimous approval. 12 regional divisions adopting the protocol. They're training hunters in psychological manipulation, surveillance, social engineering. The whole network is shifting from warriors to intelligence operatives.
Lucien's expression remained perfectly neutral, but his hands clenched at his sides. And the humans you destroy in the process? Acceptable casualties. Damien's voice went flat. Marcus says anyone who works for monsters is complicit. They enable supernatural survival. They're not innocent. She cleans floors, Lucien said softly. She hums while she works. She leaves flowers in vases. She thinks no one notices. Tell me how that makes her complicit in anything. She helps you maintain your cover. Without human staff, you'd be exposed. You need people like her. So Damien's mouth clamped shut as Lucien raised his hand. Enough. The Vampire King turned away, walking toward the far side of the basement where old weapons hung on the stone walls, remnants from centuries of conflicts he'd survived. Your uncle has built something insidious. Not just a hunt him operation, a systematic program to exploit human vulnerability and turn emotional connections into liabilities. He's protecting humanity, Damien managed through the compulsion's grip. He's terrorizing innocent people and calling it justice. Lucien pulled an ancient sword from the wall, examining the blade. For a moment, Damien thought his death had arrived. Instead, Lucien set the weapon down. Killing you would accomplish nothing. Your uncle would simply recruit another nephew, another expendable foot soldier to execute his psychological attacks. So what are you going to do? Lucien turned back, and his eyes blazed brighter. I'm going to dismantle the entire operation. Every cell, every hunter, every database and safe house and weapons cache. But first, I need to ensure Alara is protected, because your uncle made a critical error. What error? He assumed I would react emotionally, rush to defend her, make myself vulnerable. Lucien's smile was cold and ancient. I will defend her, but I won't be emotional about it. I'll be methodical, strategic. I'm going to use every resource at my command, 8 centuries of accumulated power, connections, and knowledge to destroy a network that thinks human suffering is acceptable collateral damage. Damien's heart hammered. Marcus will kill you. Marcus will try. Lucien walked to the basement door. You'll stay here. Comfortable quarters, adequate food. You're not a prisoner, you're insurance. When your uncle realizes you're missing, he'll come looking, and I'll be ready. He'll know it's a trap. He'll come anyway, Lucien said, because unlike him, I understand something fundamental about human nature. He thinks emotional attachments are weakness, but they're also motivation. He'll come for you, Damien, and when he does, this war he started ends. The door closed with a hollow boom. Damien slumped against the stone wall, the compulsion finally releasing him, and he realized with growing horror that he'd just given a Vampire King everything needed to destroy the entire Hunter network. Marcus Kane stared at the blinking red dot on his screen, then watched it disappear for the 3rd time in an hour. Damien's tracker went dead again. Last ping was at the Riverside parking lot 36 hours ago. The woman standing beside him, Hunter Lieutenant Sarah Chen, leaned over the monitor. Could be a malfunction, dead battery. Damien charges his tracker religiously. Protocol. Marcus slammed his fist on the table, making coffee cups jump. He's been taken, and there's only one creature in this city with reason to take him, the target from the estate, the vampire. Marcus pulled up a file. Grainy photos from surveillance, work schedules, her tiny apartment building address. Damien completed the humiliation operation perfectly. The Maid broke publicly. If the vampire witnessed it or heard about it, he took Damien as retaliation. Sarah frowned. Or curiosity. If the vampire suspected something, he might interrogate Damien, extract information about our operations. The color drained from Marcus's face. How much does Damien know? Enough. Regional cell locations, the psychological warfare strategy, the list of 17 targets. Sarah met his eyes. If the vampire uses compulsion, Damien will tell him everything. Marcus was already moving, pulling tactical gear from the weapons locker. Then we operate under the assumption our entire network is compromised. Alert all Eastern Division hunters. Lock down safe houses. Scramble communication protocols. What about the other 17 targets? Put them under surveillance. The vampire might go after them now that he knows their bait. Marcus strapped on a shoulder holster. But first, we leverage the asset we know he's already interested in. The Maid. Alara Bennett, 26, works at the estate, lives alone, no family in the area. She's isolated, emotionally vulnerable after the diner incident, and clearly important enough that the vampire took Damien over it. Marcus pulled up a street map. We grab her, use her as bait to draw the vampire out, force him to expose himself fully. Sarah hesitated. If he took Damien, he's already exposed. Why would he risk more for a human maid?
Because these creatures are predictable. They live forever, so they cling to the mortals around them. It's a pathological. He already revealed himself by taking Damien. He'll do worse to protect the girl. He grabbed his keys. Get a team together, 4 hunters, silver-loaded weapons, suppression equipment. We intercept her on her way home from work tonight. Alara left the estate at 7 p.m., exhausted and grateful the day was over. She had avoided her coworkers all day. Couldn't bear the pitying looks after the diner video had spread through the staff. Maria had apologized tearfully. The others had simply stared. She walked toward the bus stop, pulling her coat tighter against the November cold. The streetlights flickered on as dusk settled over the city, casting everything in orange and shadow. She didn't notice the black van that had been parked across the street for the past hour. Didn't see the 2 figures that fell into step behind her as she turned down the quieter side street that led to the main road. But she heard the footsteps. Fast. Too close. Alara spun, and her breath caught. 2 men in tactical gear moving with military precision. Behind them, the van pulled up, side door sliding open. Alara Bennett, we need to talk about your employer. She ran. Pure instinct, no thought, just the animal understanding that predators had found her. Her feet slapped against pavement, breath burning in her lungs. Behind her, boots pounded closer. "Don't make this difficult," one shouted. A hand grabbed her coat. She twisted, slipped free, stumbled forward. The public library loomed ahead, lights still on, people visible through the windows. Safety. Witnesses. She burst through the doors, gasping, and crashed into a reading table, books scattered. The librarian at the desk looked up in alarm. "Please," Alara choked out. "Men. Chasing me." The 2 hunters stopped the library entrance. Through the glass door saw them assess the situation. 20 people inside, security cameras, 2 public. One of them pulled out a phone. "She's in the Madison Street Library, north entrance. We can't extract without civilian witnesses." The librarian was beside Alara now, hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right? Should I call the police?" Alara couldn't answer, couldn't breathe. The hunters remained outside, watching, waiting. Then, the streetlights went out. All of them, every lamp on the block dying simultaneously, plunging the street into darkness. The hunters reached for their weapons, but they were too slow. Something moved in the darkness. Faster than human eyes could track, darker than the shadows themselves. One hunter went down silently, then the other. No screams, no shots fired, just the soft sound of bodies hitting pavement.
When the streetlights flickered back on 3 seconds later, both hunters were unconscious on the sidewalk, and a figure stood in the library doorway. Lucien looked exactly as he had outside the diner. Human disguise in place, ordinary coat, unremarkable face. But his eyes found Alara through the crowded library, and she saw something ancient and protective flicker in their depths. "You're safe now," he said quietly. The librarian blinked. Did you see what happened out there?" "Power surge," Lucien said smoothly. "Those men appear to have been electrocuted by a fallen power line. I've called emergency services." He extended a hand toward Alara. "I work at the estate. Your coworkers were worried when you didn't answer your phone. I came to check on you." It was a lie. A perfect, seamless lie delivered with absolute conviction. Alara stared at him, at the man she'd cleaned floors for but never actually met, at the employer who'd somehow appeared the moment she needed help. "How did you know?" "We should get you home," Lucien interrupted gently. "It's not safe to walk alone tonight." Outside, sirens approached. The unconscious hunters would wake with no memory of what had hit them. Compulsion could do that, erase minutes like they'd never existed. But Alara knew. Somehow, impossibly, she knew. The man standing in the library doorway wasn't human at all. Alara sat in the back of Lucien's car, hands trembling in her lap. The leather seats were soft, the vehicle utterly silent as it glided through dark streets. She should feel afraid. Every instinct screamed that she was in danger. But the men outside the library had terrified her. This man, this creature, had saved her. "What are you?" she finally whispered. Lucien's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. Red flickered there briefly, then faded. "Someone who should have protected you better.
I apologize for that. The blind date. You were there. I was. And those men who chased me, they weren't random. No, they're hunters, an organization that kills supernatural creatures. They targeted you to get to me. The words should have sounded insane. Instead, they made terrible sense. Because I work for you. Because they believe hurting you would make me careless. His voice went cold. They were wrong. It made me strategic. They pulled into an abandoned rail yard, rusted train cars looming like metal ghosts under a half moon. Alara's fear spiked, but Lucien parked and turned to face her. I can take you somewhere safe, a protected location where hunters can't reach you. But first, I need you to understand what's happening. The man who humiliated you at the diner, Damien, was working for his uncle, a hunter leader named Marcus Kane. They've developed a new strategy: identify humans connected to supernatural beings, traumatize them, then use them as bait or intelligence sources. Alara's stomach twisted. The date was fake. Calculated psychological warfare. You were one of 17 targets. Lucien's expression softened slightly. None of this was your fault. You were simply kind enough to work in my home, and they decided that made you expendable. What are you going to do? End them. No hesitation, no uncertainty. The entire network. Every hunter who thinks human suffering is acceptable collateral damage. How? Lucien's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something savage flickered across his face. It's already begun. 3 miles away in a hunter's safe house basement, Marcus Kane's entire communication network went dark. Every screen, every radio, every encrypted channel the Eastern Division used to coordinate, dead. What the hell is happening? Sarah Chen shouted, slamming her laptop. We've got backups, redundancies. He's in our system, Marcus breathed. The vampire. He got our protocols from Damien, and now he's... The lights died. Emergency backup kicked in, bathing everything in red. Then, the screaming started from the armory. Marcus ran gun drawn and found 3 hunters unconscious on the floor. The weapons vault stood open. Empty. Silver bullets, holy water, wooden stakes, ultraviolet equipment, gone. Thousands of dollars of supernatural killing gear. Vanished. Sir, a hunter burst in from the garage. The tires, the engines, were immobilized. Marcus's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered, hand shaking. Who is this? Someone making a point. Lucien's voice was silk over steel. You thought you could weaponize human vulnerability. Let me show you what actual strategy looks like. You can't fight all of us. I'm not fighting. I'm dismantling. In the background, Marcus heard sounds of destruction. Right now, my people are hitting 12 hunter locations simultaneously. Communication hubs destroyed, weapons confiscated, your financial accounts frozen by contacts and banking I've cultivated over centuries, your safe houses compromised by compulsion. 3 of your own hunters just gave me every location after I asked nicely. You're turning our own people. I'm showing them the truth, that your crusade traumatizes innocent humans, that your nephew terrorized a young woman as policy, that you call human suffering acceptable losses. Lucien's voice dropped. Some of your hunters have consciences. They're walking away. The ones who don't, they'll wish they had. The line went dead. Marcus stood in the empty armory surrounded by unconscious colleagues and felt the first true fear he'd experienced in 30 years of hunting. By dawn, the Eastern Division's infrastructure was in shambles. 7 communication hubs destroyed, 4 weapons caches emptied, 18 hunters had deserted, horrified by the psychological warfare strategy they'd only half understood. Another 12 were unconscious in hospitals with no memory of what had hit them. And Lucien hadn't killed a single one. In the rail yard, Alara watched Lucien coordinate through a series of phone calls in languages she didn't recognize. Watching him work was like watching a general command an army. Precise, ruthless, and somehow still controlled. You're doing all this because of what they did to me? She asked when he finally set the phone down. I'm doing this because they built a system that treats human pain as tactical advantage. What they did to you was merely the moment I learned about it. You were humiliated with a dollar bill in a public diner. They filmed it, shared it, planned to use your vulnerability to manipulate you later. That wasn't interrogation. That wasn't war. That was cruelty disguised as strategy. And now you're destroying them? Now I'm teaching them that supernatural beings aren't the only ones who can be strategic. He stood, offering his hand. Come, there's one more location to hit tonight, Marcus's primary headquarters. I'm going to end this personally. Alara took his hand and stood, legs unsteady. What happens after? After, you'll never be targeted again. After, no hunter will dare weaponize human emotion. After, 17 innocent people won't be used as bait. He smiled, and it was terrifying and beautiful. After, everyone learns what happens when you underestimate a vampire king's capacity for strategic vengeance. The hunter headquarters clung to the cliffside like a fortress from another era, concrete reinforced with steel, narrow windows designed for defense, a single access road that could be easily monitored. Marcus Kane had chosen the location specifically because it was defensible against supernatural attack.
He hadn't accounted for a vampire king who'd spent 8 centuries learning patience. Lucien stood at the base of the cliff as midnight approached, 5 figures flanking him, his elite guard, vampires he'd turned personally over the centuries, each one loyal beyond death. They wore dark tactical gear that made them nearly invisible against the rock face. "The girl stays in the car," Lucien said, glancing back at the vehicle where Alara waited, watching through the windshield with wide eyes. "If anything goes wrong, Thomas, you drive her to the Paris estate." "Understood." The youngest guard, a vampire named Thomas who'd been turned in 1847, nodded. "Nothing will go wrong, sire." Confidence is good. Arrogance is fatal. Lucien turned back to the fortress. "They have holy water, ultraviolet lights, and enough silver ammunition to kill a dozen vampires. Respect the weapons, even if you don't respect the men." Then he moved. 800 years of accumulated speed made him a blur against the rock. His guard followed, scaling the sheer cliff face with inhuman grace. They reached the fortress walls in seconds, dropping silently onto the concrete ramparts. 2 hunters stood guard. They went down before they could raise an alarm, not killed, but rendered unconscious with pressure points that would keep them down for hours. Lucien didn't need death tonight. He needed dismantlement. Inside, alarms shrieked. "So much for stealth," Thomas muttered. "They knew we were coming," Lucien said calmly. "Marcus isn't stupid. He's just outmatched." They moved through corridors lit by emergency lighting. Hunters appeared. 8, 12, 15, pouring from barracks with weapons raised. Silver bullets tore through the air. Holy water grenades exploded against walls. Lucien's guard engaged with brutal efficiency. Centuries of combat experience against human reflexes honed over years. It wasn't a fair fight. Hunters went down, disarmed, their weapons stripped away and crushed. The vault. Destroy their intelligence. 2 vampires peeled off, heading toward the data center where hunter records were stored. Every file on suspected supernaturals, every strategic document, every piece of the human leverage initiative, it would all burn tonight. Lucien descended deeper into the fortress, following the scent of gun oil and old fear. He found Marcus Kane in the command center, surrounded by 6 elite hunters with ultraviolet cannons aimed at the door. "You can't compel all of us before we fire," Marcus said, finger on the trigger. "UV light at this intensity will burn you to ash in seconds." "True," Lucien agreed, stopping in the doorway. "But you'll only get one shot. And I didn't come alone." His guard appeared from ventilation shafts, from ceiling panels, from shadows that shouldn't have concealed anything. The hunter spun, caught between multiple threats. And in that moment of confusion, Lucien moved. He didn't kill Marcus. He disarmed him faster than human eyes could track and slammed him against the wall with one hand at his throat. "Where's Damien?" Marcus choked out. "Safe, fed, comfortable." Lucien's eyes blazed red. "Unlike the 17 humans you targeted for psychological destruction. Unlike Alara, who you tried to kidnap yesterday. Unlike every innocent person your network has traumatized in the name of protection. They're collaborators. They're housekeepers and students and bartenders." Lucien's voice cracked like thunder. "You don't fight monsters, Marcus. You create them. You turned human vulnerability into a weapon and called it justice."
Marcus spat blood. We're saving humanity from predators. I've lived 843 years, Lucien said softly. I've killed, yes, centuries ago when I was young and angry, but I've also protected, built communities, funded hospitals, saved humans from plagues and famines and wars. What have you done besides terrorize the vulnerable? We've eliminated threats. You've traumatized a woman with a dollar bill and filmed her crying for your intelligence database. Lucien leaned closer. That's not hunting, that's sadism with paperwork. Behind them, explosions rocked the fortress, the data center, the weapons vault, the communication arrays. Systematic destruction. You're destroying everything we built, Marcus whispered. Yes, Lucien released him, letting him collapse. I'm also releasing every supernatural creature you've imprisoned here. The werewolf you've kept sedated in cell block C. The shapeshifter you've tortured for information. The young vampire you captured last month. Marcus's eyes widened. They'll kill you for this. The other hunters, the National Council. Let them try, Lucien said. But first, they have to explain to human authorities why their fortress contained evidence of kidnapping, assault, and illegal weapons trafficking. Anonymous tips have already been filed. Police arrive in 20 minutes. You're exposing us to human law? I'm exposing criminals to consequences. Lucien paused at the door. You wanted to weaponize human systems against supernaturals. Congratulations! Now human systems will dismantle your organization while I handle the supernatural side. He left Marcus in the ruins of his command center, surrounded by unconscious hunters and sparking equipment. In the cells below, Lucien found them. 3 supernatural prisoners, malnourished and terrified. He broke their chains with bare hands. Go, he commanded. Tell your people the Vampire King ended this. Tell them humans and supernaturals can coexist without organizations like this poisoning the peace. They fled into the night. 23 minutes later, police sirens echoed up the cliff road. By then, Lucien and his guard were gone, leaving only evidence and unconscious hunters for human authorities to process. In the car, Alara watched Lucien emerge from the darkness, unharmed. Is it over? She asked. Almost, he said. One final move remained. The flash drive contained everything. Financial records showing hunter organizations laundering money through shell corporations, video evidence of interrogations that crossed into torture, documentation of the Human Leverage Initiative, 17 innocent civilians targeted for psychological warfare, bank transfers paying young men like Damien to humiliate vulnerable women, kidnapping logs, assault records, everything Marcus Kane and his network had done, compiled into one devastating digital package. Lucien stood in his study at dawn, the flash drive resting on his desk like a small bomb. Alara sat across from him, having refused to leave despite his suggestions that she rest. You're giving this to the police? She asked. To multiple agencies simultaneously, Lucien confirmed. FBI for the interstate criminal activity, local police for the assaults and kidnappings, media outlets for the public interest angle. By noon, the Hunter organization will be fighting legal battles on 12 fronts. Won't that expose your world? No. Lucien pulled up files on his computer, carefully edited versions that removed any mention of vampires, werewolves, shapeshifters. The evidence shows a militant extremist group targeting civilians based on pseudoscience and conspiracy theories. No proof of actual supernatural activity, just dangerous fanatics attacking innocent people. Alara leaned forward, reading. You're making them look like the monsters. I'm making them look like what they are. Criminals who terrorize humans and justify it with ideology. Lucien pressed send, and the files began uploading to secure servers that would distribute them automatically. By 10 a.m., news outlets across 6 states were running the story. Militant group exposed. Secret organization targeted civilians in psychological warfare campaign. Hunter network revealed. Evidence shows systematic assault and kidnapping ring. FBI raids multiple locations. Extremist group used vulnerability lists to target victims. Marcus Kane watched the coverage from a holding cell. His fortress had been raided at dawn by federal agents who'd found exactly what anonymous tips had promised: weapons, prisoner cells, and enough documentation to guarantee decades in prison. His phone, confiscated but still logged into news apps, showed his organization being dismantled in real time.
Hunters arrested across 6 states, financial accounts frozen, regional leaders taken into custody. The supernatural community stayed invisible throughout. The story was purely human, dangerous extremists preying on vulnerable people. How? Marcus whispered to the empty cell. The answer walked free through Central City Plaza while Marcus sat in custody. Lucien moved through the crowded plaza with Alara at his side. The afternoon sun was warm despite the November chill. Humans everywhere, shopping, laughing, living their ordinary lives with no idea that their world brushed against another one constantly. They don't know, Alara said quietly. All these people, they have no idea supernatural creatures exist. That's intentional, Lucien replied. Most supernaturals prefer invisibility. We've learned that exposure brings persecution. Better to live quietly among humans than constantly fight them. But the hunters knew. Some humans always know. The question is what they do with that knowledge. Lucien guided her toward a bench overlooking a fountain. She sat, watching children play near the fountain. What happens now? The hunters who weren't arrested, will they retaliate? They'll be too busy with legal defense and public scandal. Lucien sat beside her. And I've sent word through supernatural channels. Every vampire, werewolf, and shapeshifter in the region now knows that the Hunter Network used human psychological warfare as their primary weapon. The strategy only worked because we didn't expect it. Now we do. So they've lost their advantage. Completely. Lucien's phone buzzed with messages. Clan leaders, pack alphas, coven masters, all thanking him for eliminating the threat without exposing their world. I've received 17 messages this morning praising my restraint. They expected me to slaughter every hunter. Instead, I used human systems to dismantle a human organization. Why didn't you? Kill them, I mean. You could have. Lucien was quiet for a moment. Because Marcus was partially right about one thing. There are supernatural creatures who prey on humans. Not many, but they exist. Humans deserve protection from actual threats. But targeting innocents like you, weaponizing vulnerability, traumatizing people for strategic advantage, that's not protection. That's cruelty disguised as duty. The dollar bill. All of this because of a dollar bill. All of this because I witnessed calculated cruelty and discovered it was systematic. You were humiliated in a public diner. Damien filmed your pain and reported it like a mission success. His uncle built an entire network on that philosophy, that breaking humans emotionally was acceptable if it served their goals. I couldn't allow that to continue. Alara met his eyes. You changed everything. Human supernatural politics, hunter operations, the balance of power, all to protect people you don't even know. I know one of them, Lucien said simply. She works in my home. She deserved better. Around them, Central City continued its ordinary day. News played on screens and shop windows. Hunter arrests, FBI investigations, criminal charges. The story would dominate headlines for weeks. But in the supernatural world, a different story was spreading. The Vampire King had rewritten the rules. He'd proven that strategic restraint was more powerful than violence. He'd dismantled a network without exposing the community. He'd turned one woman's humiliation into a catalyst for systemic change. What happens to me now? Alara asked. I can't go back to just cleaning floors after all this. Lucien smiled. No, you can't. Which brings us to tomorrow's conversation. About what? About a new position, one that ensures you're never vulnerable again. The west wing of Lucien's estate looked different in daylight. Alara had walked these halls 100 times, but she'd never really seen them. The way sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting the marble floors in blues and golds. The way centuries-old tapestries told stories she'd never stopped to read. She'd been summoned to Lucien's private study, and her stomach twisted with uncertainty. The past 7 days had turned her entire world inside out. She'd gone from invisible Maid to the center of a supernatural war, from humiliated and broken to protected and valued. But she didn't know what came next. Lucien stood by the window when she entered, wearing a simple dark suit,
that somehow made him look more otherworldly rather than less. He turned as she closed the door. "Thank you for coming," he said formally. "You're my employer. You summoned me. Am I being fired?" "No." Lucien gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Please sit. We need to discuss your future." She sat, heart hammering. Through the window behind him, she could see the estate grounds. Acres of maintained gardens, high walls that suddenly seemed less decorative and more protective. The Hunter network is largely dismantled. Marcus Kane and 37 others face federal charges. Their organization's credibility is destroyed. The remaining hunters are scattered, defensive, and significantly less dangerous. "That's good," Alara said carefully. "It is. However, you're now known to the supernatural community. Your name appeared in Hunter documents. Your connection to me is recorded, even if those records are now in FBI custody." Lucien's expression was serious. "You're no more completely invisible. Some entities will know you worked for a vampire king during a conflict." Fear spiked. "So I'm still in danger?" "You're marked as protected, which is both safer and more complicated than being unknown. The supernatural world operates on reputation and power structures. My protection means no creature would dare harm you, but it also means that you can't return to a normal human life without that shadow following you." Alara's throat tightened. "So what are you saying? I have to leave the city? Go into hiding?" "I'm saying I'm offering you a choice." Lucien pulled a folder. "Option 1, I can relocate you. New city, new identity, financial support to start fresh. You'd be safe, anonymous, able to live a completely ordinary human life far from supernatural politics. And option 2, you stay here at the estate, but not as a maid." He slid the folder across the desk. "As my human liaison." Alara opened it, scanning documents she barely understood. Contracts, job descriptions, salary figures that made me dizzy. A liaison does exactly, bridges the gap between my world and the human one. Supernaturals are excellent at many things, but understanding modern human culture, navigating bureaucracy, maintaining appearances, these require human insight. You'd manage the estate's human-facing operations, coordinate with vendors and contractors, handle legal matters that require a human presence. You want me to work for you? Officially? In public? I want you to have a position that reflects your value and ensures your protection is formal, not circumstantial. What happened to you is unacceptable. You were targeted, humiliated, and terrorized because you were perceived as weak and expendable. I want to ensure that never happens again." Alara stared at the contract. The salary alone was more than she'd made in 5 years of housekeeping. But it wasn't the money that made her hands shake. "Why? Why do you care so much? I'm just a maid who got caught in something bigger than herself."
"You were underestimated," Lucien said quietly. "Damien looked at you and saw someone disposable. Marcus Kane saw a tool to be manipulated. Even your coworkers saw someone who needed pity." His eyes met hers, still red-tinged, still ancient, but somehow gentle. "I saw someone who worked double shifts without complaint, who brought beauty to rooms she thought no one noticed, who defended herself with a dollar bill and whatever dignity she could salvage. You were never disposable. You were simply unprotected." Tears pricked her eyes. "This is too much. I don't have any experience with supernatural politics or—" "You'll learn. I have 8 centuries to teach you, and you've already proven you can survive a war. Everything else is just details." Alara looked down at the contract again, at the position title, Human Liaison and Estate Manager, at the clause ensuring her protection extended to family and friends, at the salary that would change her life, at the simple truth that she'd never have to feel powerless again. "If I accept this," she said slowly, "I can't go back to being invisible. No, you'll be visible, protected, valued." Lucien's expression grew serious.
but also marked as part of my world. That comes with complications. More danger, more responsibility, more knowledge, more consequences for your choices." He paused. "But also more power to ensure you're never targeted again, never humiliated, never treated as disposable." Alara thought of the diner, of Damien sliding a crumpled dollar bill across the table, of laughter following her into the cold night, of being so small and invisible that cruelty felt casual. She thought of the past 7 days, of watching a vampire king dismantle an entire organization because one woman had been humiliated, of being protected instead of pitied, of being valued instead of dismissed. She picked up the pen. "Where do I sign?" 3 months later, Alara stood in the estate's main hall, coordinating a charity gala that would host 200 guests, half human, half supernatural, though the humans would never know. She wore a tailored suit and carried a tablet with schedules, vendor contacts, and seating arrangements. Maria barely recognized her. "You look so different," she former coworker whispered during setup. "You seem powerful." Alara smiled when she said it. "I was always worth more than $1. I just needed someone to prove it to me." That night, as guests filled the hall with music and laughter, Lucien found her on a balcony overlooking the grounds. "You've done well," he said. "The event is flawless." "It's what you pay me for." But Alara smiled when she said it. "I pay you for many things. Excellence is simply expected." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the celebration below, humans and supernatural creatures mingling peacefully, unaware of the war that had made this possible. "Do you regret it?" Lucien asked. "Accepting this role? Giving up a normal life?" Alara thought of her tiny apartment, her invisible existence, the exhausting cycle of double shifts and pity. She thought of a dollar bill in public humiliation and being so small the world could crush her without noticing. Then she thought of respect, protection, purpose. "No," she said simply. "I don't regret it at all." A single dollar bill, crumpled, stained, thrown across a table as an insult, had sparked a war that changed human supernatural politics, dismantled an empire hunter, and transformed one woman's place in the world. Alara kept that dollar bill in a frame in her office now, a reminder of where she'd been and how far she'd come. She'd been underestimated once. Never again.